Good afternoon. My name is Greg Chumley, president of Chumco Incorporated, and I really wish that I could be there with you this afternoon. IPMA hired me to do a study on the future of the implant. It was sponsored by Canon, and what we're doing is saying, what's it going to be like 5 years in the future? The study involved interviewing numerous implant managers, senior management who have implants reporting into them, as well as a survey of 140 implants across the United States and a couple from some foreign countries. As you can see, the entire country is well represented. We also had a good representation by industry. The vast majority of the respondents were from higher education, followed by government, followed by healthcare, followed by K-12, financial and banking, not-for-profits, manufacturing, sales, insurance, and then it kind of dwindles down. This is a good representation, and it kind of follows what we expect in the demographics of the market where implants are most prevalent. The survey respondents were also fairly representative of the industry in terms of the size of their operations. Most had fewer than 5 people, and it decreased down to the fewest had 100 or more people in them. This is consistent with the marketplace today. One of the first questions in our survey was asking respondents to weigh in on what they thought their budgets and staffing were going to look like in 5 years. Was it going to remain about the same? Was it going to increase? Was it going to decrease? Was it going to dramatically increase or dramatically decrease? The good news is that 81% believe their budgets will be the same or greater in 5 years. And if you look at these two charts, they're pretty similar between staffing and budget. A few more think that their staffs will be smaller, but as a whole, the market is very optimistic. I believe that if I had run this survey 10 years ago, these charts would look nothing like they do today. There's a lot more optimism in the marketplace, and that is great news. Another question I asked is whether or not implants had strategic plans. And frankly, I was rather surprised by the answer. 59% of our respondents said that they do indeed have strategic plans. Frankly, I would have expected that to be closer to 20 or 30%. So again, that is great news. A neat thing when you do one of these surveys is you get to not just report the statistics, but to do some analysis with it. And I wanted to see how this affected implants optimism. So remember the chart that I showed you says, do you think your budgets are going to grow or stay the same or decrease? I analyzed that data, splitting it into how the people who have strategic plans feel, what their optimism is, and what's the optimism of the people who do not have strategic plans. And what do you think happened with the results? As you might expect, people who have strategic plans are more likely to expect growth. In fact, if you look at this chart, the brown columns are the ones that do not have strategic plans. The green columns are the ones who do. So what this chart tells us is that if you do not have a strategic plan in place, you're more likely to feel like your budget's going to have a dramatic reduction or get smaller or remain unchanged. If you do have a strategic plan in place, you're more likely to think that your budget is going to increase over the next 5 years. And if you look at it, only people who have strategic plans feel as though they have a possibility of a dramatic increase in budget. Nobody who doesn't have a strategic plan feels that way. So that's pretty cool. That says that the people who have plans are more likely to think that they're going to grow. Now, one of the things you learn when you analyze data like this is that you need to look at it from a number of different angles, just to make sure that your conclusion isn't being driven by some other factor. For example, let's take a look at strategic plans by size. Every single respondent who had 100 or more employees has a strategic plan, and yet only about 40% of the fewer than 5 employee implants have strategic plans. And it kind of goes up, except for my 50 to 99 segment, which are troublemakers. I'm not sure why that's lower than the rest. I'm going to count that as the exception that proves the rule. But what this does show you is the larger the implant, the more likely you are to have a strategic plan. So maybe what the data will show is that the larger implants are more optimistic than the smaller ones, and it has nothing to do with strategic planning. Let's take a look. This chart shows their optimism. Red means I think I'm going to have a significant decrease in budget. Yellow means I'm going to have a decrease. Blue is unchanged. Light green means I expect my budget to grow. And dark green means I expect dramatic growth. If I look at this by size, I see absolutely no correlation with whether or not they have a strategic plan. In fact, the most volatile is the 100 plus. So what this tells me is that that chart we looked at before that says you have more optimism if you have a strategic plan, it's not really about size. So that's good. Well, let's look at it another way. Perhaps it's not about size, perhaps it's by industry. Maybe some industries are more optimistic and they just happen to be the ones that have more strategic planning. So let's look at it. The industry that has the highest percentage of strategic plans is insurance. 80% of the respondents in the insurance industry have strategic plans, followed by K-12, followed by finance and banking, followed by government, followed by utilities and energy, followed by higher ed, followed by healthcare, followed by not-for-profits and associations, and then a big drop-off down in manufacturing, sales, and all the rest of them. Now, I should point out that I only included industries that had at least 3 responses. So again, if the optimism is tied to industry rather than strategic planning, then we should see greater optimism in insurance, then K-12 down. Let's see what happens. I don't know about you, but I don't see any correlation between these. They're all across the board. So what this tells us is that this whole message about optimism, basis upon strategic planning, there is a correlation there, and it does not have to do with size or business. What does it have to do with? Is there another thing that we could tighten this on? In the survey, I asked whether or not they had a good strategic plan or not. Well, you can't ask that question. So what I did was I said, I think that there are 7 key elements for an in-plant strategic plan. Now, you might not need all of them. Some of them might not apply. You might have other ones, but you should probably have a fair number of these in your plan. It ought to be aligned with your company, your agency, your school, your association's overall strategic plan. I find that strategic plans need to have measurable targets for revenue, for clients, for volumes, for services, and not just round words that sound good and are true, but aren't measurable, such as, we will meet the changing needs of our clients. What does that mean? So a good plan will have targets, specific ones. In 5 years, our volume will be X. Or currently 20% of our organization uses our services. In 5 years, that will be 80%. Things like that. And they should also have specific mileposts. In order to achieve this services growth or this revenue growth or this print volume growth, we are going to need to make these specific investments in order to attain those targets. And you need to have implementation mileposts. We will acquire this online portal in December of 2017. It will be implemented by March of 2018. By June of 2018, 20% of our business will be coming through it. And by January of 2019, 90% of our business will be coming through it. Whatever they are, specific dates, amounts, numbers. Okay, I beat that to death. So, what I asked was, given these 7 targets, I don't expect everybody to have everything. How many of the people who have strategic plans have at least 4 of them? Well, it turns out that even though nearly 60% of the implants I surveyed have strategic plans, only 25% of the implants we surveyed have 4 or more of those 7 key elements. Okay, well, what do they have? 90% of them say that their strategic plans are aligned with their company. About 70% have services targets. About 65% have implementation mileposts, and then it drops off. Look at this. Only 40% of them have targets for their revenue. So only 40% say that in 5 years, this is the amount of money I'm going to be generating. Only about 35% have targets of how many clients they're going to try to get within the next 5 years. Same with volumes, less than half have volume targets, less than half have mileposts, less than half have investment mileposts. So that says a lot of the plans are missing some key elements. What if I took that same question I asked about optimism of growth and combined it with whether or not their strategic plans had each of these elements in it, right? But let's see if this theory of mine, that strategic plans are important, actually plays. I looked at the companies who have strategic plans who are missing each of these elements. How do these things drive their optimism? And look at this. Funny thing. That first pillar there, that dark brown one, those are the implants who do not have strategic plans. Only about 10 or 12% of them think that they're going to grow. All the rest think that they're either going to stay the same or decrease. The rest of the columns are all companies who have strategic plans, but they are missing each one of those elements. They might have other elements, but if they are missing that element, what is their optimism? When you look at it and you say, in a lot of cases, it's not much different than if I didn't have a strategic plan at all. Well, let's ask the other question. What does your optimism look like if you have a strategic plan which contains each of those elements? Ready? Whoa, how about that? Let's go back. No elements, with elements. Without elements, with elements. I could do this all day. This is cool. This shows that having those elements really boosts your optimism about whether you're going to be growing. And it kind of makes sense. And let's look at it a little more closely. Let's just look at these first two. Again, the dark brown column says these are the people who don't have a strategic plan. And only maybe about 15% think that they are going to grow or dramatically grow. The ones that have a strategic plan who are not aligned with the company, it's only about 12% think that they're going to be growing. But when they have one which is aligned with their company, over 30% believe that they're going to grow. That's double, And not only is it double, there's a number of them in there who think they're going to dramatically grow. None of the ones that have strategic plans which are not aligned with the company think they're going to dramatically grow. Look at the revenue targets. Again, if they don't have revenue targets in their strategic plan, they're not much more likely to think they're going to grow than if they didn't have a plan at all. Yet, if they have a plan that does have revenue targets, they're 3 times as likely to feel optimistic about growth in the future. And look at the percentage who think they're going to dramatically grow. Let's look at these two side by side, and you can see across the board for every single element included in a strategic plan, those implants are more optimistic about their future than if they weren't included. Sometimes dramatically. Look at revenue targets, look at services targets, look at implementation targets. It's pretty dramatic, isn't it? That's all good, but there's always the reality test that says, why do you think that is? So let's think about that for a second. Let's say your strategic plan is aligned with your corporate strategy. Well, think about it. That means that you have a strategic plan about what your implant is doing. In it, you define your role in your company or school or agency, and your management has seen this strategic plan. They've signed off on it, meaning they understand your role in the company, your value you bring, and they agree with it. Well, that's one of the key challenges I'll talk about in a little bit that also came out in this study. How do I get senior management to understand my role and the value I bring to the company? Well, guess what? The people who have that in their strategic plans and it's signed up by their management knows. Second, measurable targets. If you have objectives that can be measured, you have objectives that can be managed. Now, I don't know how many of you have dealt with sales teams or sales management, but I'll tell you something, a little secret. I've dealt with a lot of sales managers, and I've never seen a sales plan that says, You did well last year. Try to sell as many monochrome copiers as you did last year. And a lot of the competition is really finding that there's a lot of interest in color in the market. So if you could sell some color production presses, that would be good. And please pay attention to your clients. And if you can wrap in any services, professional services or software to help them with their needs, that would be greatly appreciated. That's what you should really be doing this year. That's not what a sales plan looks like. The sales plan says you will sell this many monochrome presses, you will sell this many color presses, you will include this many services, professional services and software packages in those sales. You have this revenue target. And guess what? Every month that sales manager is down on their team. They're saying, tell me how many you've sold, tell me your pipeline, tell me how many are in process, tell me the issues you're having reaching those things. These plans have numbers and they are managed and they deliver results. Think of this as exactly the same type of thing. It's got to be specific in order to get results. Investment and implementation plans. The other thing to think about this is sort of like a contract with your management. You're saying, based off of the study, this great future of the implant study I got from IPMA, and based upon what I know about my clients and based upon the industry trends and whatever, I believe that my volume is going to grow by 20% over the next 5 years. But in order to do that, I need to invest in a wide format printer. I need to invest in inkjet. I need to invest in an online storefront, whatever it is. So this is like a contract that says, this is what I need, you got to give me this, and I will deliver that. And they got to be specific. Now, we all know things change, and people renege on deals and whatever, but you're going in and you're getting agreement and sign-off from management at this time saying, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So it's not a surprise when you come up with your handout saying, I need some money for this press. The expectations are set up front. And then the last thing to think about is this is a 5-year plan. You just presented specific targets, specific data, specific implementation, specific needs to your management. They signed off on you saying, this is where we're going to be in 5 years. That's got a tacit agreement right now that you're going to be there in 5 years. How many would like to have that thinking going on in their management? So that alone would explain why implants are more optimistic if they have these types of things in their plans than if they don't. Now, everything changes. But guess what? You've delivered this 5-year plan, you've gotten sign-off. And just like my sales plan example, you're going to go in and you're going to measure against those. Reporting, how are you doing against those objectives? What are your challenges? What's holding you back? What are your successes? And on an annual basis, you're going to go and revisit this 5-year plan. And you're saying, yep, it's year 2, we need this now, or this changed, we need to do this, and here's the next 5 years. So it's an ongoing process, and you're always in front of your management, looking to the future and the role that you play in your company. So it's not at all surprising that the implants who have these types of elements in their strategic plan are more optimistic about their growth, because they have a real way to achieve it. Now, I'll get off my soapbox. Here's some more interesting stuff from the survey. So we asked 3 write-in questions. One was, how do you see your implant changing in 5 years? Second is, what kind of challenges do you see that you're going to have to overcome in order to make those changes? And third, what are you doing to overcome those challenges? And I don't know about you guys, but when I take a survey, I almost never do a write-in comment. And I've given a lot of surveys over time, and you rarely get very much write-in material. Everybody checks the little boxes, does the pull-downs, and they write in, yeah, I'm done. 78% of the respondents filled out the answers to those questions. They were evidently the right questions because people cared. And here's kind of what they said. In terms of how will your implant have changed in 5 years, the big things that really were on everybody's mind were tightening budgets, changing volumes, increase in quality and types of services offered, making strategic moves more quickly, becoming leaner, taking a more manufacturing model. There were a lot of comments about implant size, facilities, but they were all over the map. Some were moving, some were expecting to grow, some were expecting to shrink. It was all over the place. Staffing was a little more consistent. Whether they felt their staffs were going to grow or decrease, just about everybody felt that their staffs were going to be quite different in 5 years. There's going to be a lot of retirement and replacement. They expected new, younger, more technology proficient staff. They expected their staff to require new skill sets on new equipment or new solutions. They saw considerable changes in their printing technology. A lot of them were looking at adding wide format equipment. There's a lot of interest in digital inkjet production, digital color presses, removal of offset presses, a reduction in transactional printing, replacement of aging equipment, and various new mail inserters and other digital finishing equipment. Software, the big thing that came out of this was a lot of people looking at online storefronts and web-to-print solutions. The second most mentioned one was workflow automation, and a lot of talk about making more integrated solutions. In terms of services and job offerings, again, large format work, short run and rush work, more variable data, multimedia and video, packaging, fulfillment services, design services, and non-print services like vehicle fleet management, and of course, printer fleet management, mail management, insourcing, and consolidation of printing and managing facilities were all big on the list. So what were the challenges to making those changes a reality? Well, senior management understanding of what they were doing was top of mind for most people. The constant fear of being outsourced was the most common threat and challenge that everybody faced. Budgets, of course, a big challenge. That came in two flavors. One was a shrinking budget for the implant that they had to deal with doing more with less. The other was a shrinking budget for their overall organization, which would translate into fewer jobs coming into the implant. Staffing was the other big area. How do you find skilled talent? How do you retain qualified staff? How do you get approval to backfill positions? Technology was another challenge. How do you refresh your aging equipment? How do you deal with changing technologies and understand them and what is appropriate? How do you add new printing technologies in? And implementing technologies, particularly with regard to IT hurdles. In terms of competition and jobs and volumes, there's the constant search for more print jobs, and there's also the challenge of finding alternative revenue sources besides print and finding ways to remain relevant to your organization. Another challenge that a group of challenges that came out in a lot of these write-ins was about marketing and sales and customer perception. A lot of challenge in how to educate your customers and how to shift departments from doing their own amateur design work to using your professional services, or challenges how to enhance the brand, or how to retain and grow your business from existing clients. How do you reach and win new internal clients? And there are a lot of challenges with shop management. How do you change your internal attitudes and culture? How do you become more efficient? How do you reduce your turnaround times and prices? And how do you handle changing volumes? I'm hoping that a lot of that sounds familiar to the members of this audience. It ought to. These words and these word clouds ought to look familiar, and the messages and concerns and challenges and directions of your peers ought to sound familiar as well. But the more interesting thing, I think, is what are these people doing to get there? They said this is where they want to go. They said these are the challenges I'm facing. What are you doing to overcome them? And that's the interesting thing, because that's where you get ideas about what you could do as well. A lot of these comments about addressing these things were dealing with their own senior management. Number one was develop a strategic plan. Number two was ongoing conversations with upper management, educating them about what they did, preparing a solid business cases, implementing the strategic plan. Budgets, continual budget planning, managing costs, reducing expenses, not surprising. Staffing. Most of the comments about staffing had to do with training, ongoing training, cross-training, keeping employees informed of future plans, working with HR, reaching out to their career and technical education programs, hiring contractors, and then transitioning the good ones to permanent positions. And let me underscore, there were a lot of comments about staffing in what people are doing. Technology, people are looking to add wide format printers, refreshing and modernizing their technology, implementing new storefronts we've mentioned before, and automation was a big one. Automating processes was a big one that came up again and again. In terms of jobs and volumes and services, there are a lot who are looking at accepting non-print responsibilities, developing niche markets for print and mail, diversifying into variable data, expanding into different product lines, marketing and sales. I was very encouraged with a number of comments of people saying they need to be more proactive with inside sales. It's no longer acceptable to sit in your implant and wait for the work to come to you. People are saying, I've got to go, I can't just send an email, I can't just stuff a flyer into the paychecks. I've got to have people go out and meet with departments, meet with these clients, and sell our business to them. There's a lot who are talking about how they're evaluating where they can provide services to assist the company. Not just printing, but how to assist the company. Developing partnerships with the creative media and marketing teams, really getting involved at the early decision way before they buy the print, making sure they're in meetings where decisions are being made, and becoming involved in printing over the entire enterprise. So perhaps that gave you some ideas of what you could be doing that you might not be thinking about doing today. Or maybe if you weren't sure whether those were really good ideas, hearing that other people are doing them might give you a little bit of confidence to pursue them yourself. I just want to wrap up with kind of a recap. Over 80% of the implants surveyed believe their operational budgets will be the same or greater in 5 years. That is fantastic news. Their top areas of growth are going to be variable data printing, production digital toner printing, general wide format printing, graphic design services, branding compliant, and mailing services. That's where they say their growth is going to be. Their top investment areas are going to be in digital production toner color presses, online storefronts or web to print, graphic design packages, print MIS packages, production automation solutions, color management software, digital monochrome presses, and flatbed and roll-fed wide format printers. And their top business growth activities, the things that they are doing to drive change, number one was proactive customer education, getting CSRs out from behind the phones and into the offices of the clients and really educating them about what your services are, what you can do for them, how you could help them do their job. The second one was developing a strategic plan. Third one was self-promotion to management. Fourth was marketing to internal customers. And then the next one was sales to existing customers. And I didn't show up, but the next one down there is sales to new potential clients within the organization. So that's what people are doing. That's how they are going to drive the change. And in order to do that, they need to have a plan. And you can see the difference between if they have a plan versus they don't, and if that plan consists of measurable targets and milestones, or if it doesn't. So with that, I leave you. I hope this was helpful. All IPMA members will be mailed a full copy of the 45-page report. Those who are not members are welcome to meet with Mike or contact IPMA to find out how they can get a copy as well. And as you know, Mike knows everything implant, so I will turn it over to Mike to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. I wish I could have been here.